Hey, what's up? My name is Frank Dominic, and welcome to Perfectly Frank. Today, I have a special guest. We have Professor Neil. Sometimes that happens, and unlike on TikTok, I can't go for another take. So, Neil, why don't you introduce yourself and let everybody know what you do?
Sure. So I'm Neil Shiminsky, probably better known as Professor Neil online, and I do a bunch of things. My day job, I am a college professor of English at Cambrian College in Sudbury, where Frank and I were talking before we started recording here. I also am the faculty union president. Um, a little bit of responsibility juggling there. And then online, somebody recently described me as a pugilist, as a social media pugilist.
Okay.
Which for those who aren't familiar with that sort of archaic language, he's calling me a boxer. Which I
I was gonna say
actually like.
you take people to task is kind
Yeah,
of yeah.
yeah. I mean that's like my signature style, at least for the moment, right? Where I mostly respond to people who are giving advice on how to be a man or how to date, usually dating advice for men, um, relationship advice for men,
Yeah, you
or
really do
just
veer into the toxic masculinity space. It seems like, right?
exactly. Yeah, I like to pick fights with the manosphere, is basically what it comes down to. And so that is a lot of my social media persona. Although I sometimes also talk about pet interests like Canadian politics, something that you're quite familiar with, um, politics more generally too, or even comic books, superheroes.
I was
That
gonna say
that's
I've seen you do
actually
a few breakdowns of like superheroes, whether it's in media or in comparison
yeah.
to the modern day, and kind of like a way to like look at things through a different lens. I think that might have been actually how I was first introduced to your content was a video about superheroes. Um,
And
yeah,
actually, that's how my channel started. It's teaching a class on comic books and looking for a place where I could share more of the content that I wasn't getting into in class, or that I also just really enjoyed teaching in class, and thought, hey, this might be fun to share online. I think we're getting away from me introducing myself, and I'm now moving
well, that's
into
fine. It's part of the conversation, right? We're kind of rolling with it because I think what I was gonna say was like it's similar to me. I'm a teacher,
Mhm,
and I teach economics. I teach business, and so when I started finding the ability to speak online, and I was able to like, oh yeah, like I can do what I do in the classroom, but I can do it on a more personal level. I can talk about things that matter more to me. I can actually show my bias online, and I can
mhm.
I can be unscripted, and I can be um, more truly authentically me, and just kind of like talk about the way the world and the way in which I see it. It was very liberating, and that's kind of why I
Yeah.
keep doing it because it feels like I'm able to alleviate some of the pressure that builds up. Is that kind of how you feel about it? Like it's there's like that pressure, and then you gotta let it go, right?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. There are instances where yes, especially it feels like a cliche to say like now more than ever. That yeah, that pressure to sometimes you're just like venting your rage
Exactly.
online,
Yeah.
right? It's I need somewhere to go and scream and just let the frustration out. And thank God for having these sorts of channels available to us because, oh boy, yeah, I'm sort of a lesser degree when I started back in what was it like March of 2021, and it started with the comic book stuff, superhero stuff, and it was during one of the lockdown periods.
That's when
So
I think a lot of us got our start. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot of people started like during the original lockdown for reasons. I waited until the second one. I think I did a lot of home maintenance in 2020. 2021, there was nothing left for me to do in my home that I could afford anyway. Um, so I started making TikToks. Um, and it started, like I said originally, with stuff that I was already teaching in class. And then over the course of 12 or 18 months, um, gender, race, identity was always a part of what I was talking about in relation to superheroes. which I think just sort of led sort of naturally, organically into broadening out, talking about identity and identity politics in general, um, and led me in the direction of where I am right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't know about you, but when I talk about when I do some of these like I don't want to call them takedowns because I always feel like it's too aggressive, but like you do kind of lead in with the hit me with it thing, right? Like that's kind of
Yep.
your little signature there. So we are in some ways engaging in a bit of a fight, right? And it's a
Mhm.
fight about like identity. It's a fight about like ideology. Uh, do you ever feel as though when you are taking on these fights, like has there ever been a time where you kind of like looked at a video you made and you're like, maybe that person meant well, and I was like kind of making a mistake, or have you done a good job of curating it so you're really only taking on the bad faith actors?
Oh no, you're absolutely correct. There are moments where sometimes I catch myself, um, where I've made a response and either, in retrospect, I realized like, oh, I came after that person a little too hard. Or, alternatively, that person maybe meant well and I should have shown them a little more grace. Um, and I have actually toward the end of December, I posted a video, which was kind of my mea culpa video. I reviewed a few videos that I regretted making.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
And included in there was, for instance, I criticized this trend that was happening, I think it was early in the fall, where men were trying on their girlfriends and wives' muumuus,
Okay,
and it's it seems much cuter to me now than it did at the time. And the thing that I got hung up on was that they would put on these floral muumuus, and they were all floral, and they would stand in front of the camera and they would flex and grunt, and like looking at how good they looked in this muumuu. Um, and the issue that I took with it was like, guys, you're just looking for an excuse to like show like I am so manly. I am
that I look
so
manly in
masculine.
anything.
Yeah, exactly. I can put on a pink floral print muumuu and I still look like I could kick your ass. Um, and people were not super thrilled in the comments of that video. And they're like,
Oh, they're
yeah,
just having
but
fun or whatever. They're not doing
yeah,
any harm.
exactly. They're
You
they're
know.
they're 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 still like putting on something feminine. They're being playful, having fun with it. Like, give them a little bit of credit. And I thought, yeah, I will. I'll. It's like even if I think that the trend looks like it's also giving them a bit of an excuse to really showcase their
Oh wow, yeah.
machismo. Um, it's still something. It's a start. Um, and yeah, when people are willing to have fun with something that's a little bit outside of gendered expectations, we should be encouraging that and
Yeah,
not
right. You
finding
want to
excuses
support it.
to slap.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things I think it's really difficult for a lot of people to like kind of find those boundaries as to like what is the thing that I'm going to take on and what is worth taking on versus something that's
Mhm.
kind of like playful and harmless. Like even in the classroom, right? Like as a teacher, I I know that I can't come down the way I do in a video where I'm telling somebody
Sure.
why they're wrong. A lot of it in the classroom, especially with these 14 to 17-year-olds, it's about guidance. It's about like showing them a different way of thinking and like letting them come to their own conclusions. And I try to do that online, and I know that you sometimes do that too with the way that you break things down. But when I think about like what is the thing that I want my students to leave my classroom with, I always think I want them to have a way of looking at the world, especially in my econ class. I want them to be able to look at the world in different ways. I want them to be able to break down problems in different ways, and I want them to be able to fairly critique things. And I hate saying both sides, but what I mean is like looking at two different options in the argument and thinking, okay, what is the consequences of this and what are the consequences of that, knowing that
Mhm.
there's never a perfect solution. If you were to say that there's one takeaway that you want people who come to your channel to really kind of go home with and like improve upon themselves, what would that be?
Oh, interesting question. Well, I want to take it back a step first
Yeah, for sure.
because sort of similarly, like the approach that I take in a classroom, in a college classroom, is dissimilar from the one that I'm taking online. For the simple reason that, despite the existence of comments or the opportunity to reply to somebody in video, uh, what we're doing online is not a dialogue. I can't have a conversation, with the 20,000 people who are seeing a video on TikTok. More often on Instagram, it's like 100,000. So there is going to be like a bit more of a lecture tone, and I am going to be talking at people much more than I would in a classroom. Because in the class we can have that conversation, we can have that dialogue. I can
Bounce off
try a
people.
variety of strategies to try to lead you to the point that I'm trying to make. Hopefully, like you can get yourself there, and I don't have to tell you what the takeaway is.
Teaching without telling. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And unfortunately, if I try to do that online in a video, the comments will be full of people who are reaching the wrong conclusion. So there's a lot more hand-holding, and I use a lot more force online. So the takeaway that I then hope people have, I mean, it depends on the particular video. A lot of the time, it's about actually privileging reliable sources and research, questioning a lot of the lines that they hear from dating coaches and from self-professed experts in a field, and having a little more skepticism when you hear claims that are offered without any attempt to validate. There was a video that somebody sent me yesterday where I was counting the number of stats that this dating coach used. And he quoted 5, and all of them were lies.
Of
There,
course.
there was not a source given for any of them, and I've been doing this long enough and frequently enough that I recognized all of them as fake stats that are repeated by these dating coaches and that are wildly out of step
Well, and if you
with
say it,
reality.
if you say it often enough, and if enough people in your same sphere are saying it often enough, then the person who's watching it's going to be like, well, why would all of these people be lying to me?
Sure, sure. And he opened with, something that I think is it's untrue, but it's repeated so frequently that people don't even think to challenge it. And it's the half of all marriages end in divorce.
Which I'm
That
pretty sure it's a lot lower in Canada, is it not?
it has never been true anywhere.
Yeah.
It has creeped up towards 40% at times. I'm thinking of, when no-fault divorce was introduced in Canada and the USA back in the 70s and 80s. The divorce rate creeped up. And now it's down around 30%, because it's been declining steadily for 40 years, which is another, fact that is frequently repeated by people that divorce is climbing.
Well, and some people
No,
don't also consider the fact that there's certain people who might get divorced 2, 3, 4 times, and that changes the numbers, right? Like there are outliers in all data sets, and there
yep,
are people who get married significantly more times than the average, and that skews things.
sure, sure. And so you're coming up with another totally reasonable way to slice up the data, right? Maybe 30% of all marriages end in divorce, but if we excluded, second and third and fourth marriages, and we're just looking at, what's the likelihood that you, person, will get divorced, the likelihood would be even lower. But that was how this video started. Half of all marriages end in divorce. We all know this. The hell we do. That's not true. So no, we don't know
We
that.
all know this. We all know this undisputable fact.
Absolutely. And so that's really, if I can boil it down to one thing, something that I want people to come away from my videos, it's that we have to challenge even what strikes us as obvious. These common sense facts that are shared, that are in fact nonsense. And all we have to do is dig a little bit, scratch a little bit away at the surface there, and find out that there's nothing underneath.
And I think so. I try to have a bit of a similar ideology when it comes to talking about like political things that everyone just kind of believes to be inherently true. Like people talk about like some people say, oh, the liberals are these socialists, and other people are like, oh, no, the liberals are like a far right wing party, and I'm like, hmm. Or maybe not, and maybe they have some policies that are socially progressive and other policies that are definitely regressive and don't go as far as they need to. And only because I use liberals as an example because it seems like everybody puts on them what
Sure.
people want to believe about their personal oogie boogie bad guy, right? Whereas like typically when people paint the conservatives, both people on the left and the center will paint them with a similar brush. It seems like the liberals tend to get it from all different angles, and I notice this even on social media. On TikTok, I'm considered a staunch leftist and a huge ally. On Instagram, people look at me as being like right of center or potentially even a conservative. People get upset when they see videos where I come out and I talk about something that's like very staunchly left. And then in many other places, like on Twitter, I'm just considered like a centrist liberal or otherwise. Even when like my ideology doesn't always like align with that kind of mainstream liberalism.
Hmm.
And so we see this kind of fragmentation across social media. We see how all these things kind of get broken down. And so when I talk about politics and when I talk about the news, I do my best to my bias, I try to wear it on my sleeve, but I try to show people like there are certain things that are just not inherently not true. Like we are not overtaxed in Canada when we compare it to other places in the world. Typically, conservatives do run massive deficits, just like the liberals do. It's not like the liberals don't also run deficits. So I try to work on that, and I try to do my best to not be too biased in my work online. But I think it just goes to show that like when we put ourselves out there, when we start talking online, we form this like kind of image of who we are, and sometimes I feel like I need to break out of that. So like I don't know if you remember earlier last year or later in the year last year, I said the person who should run for the leader of the Liberal Party should be Doug Ford.
I I remember that. Yeah.
I I got I got beaten up left, right, and center about that one because the point of the video was inherently that I didn't believe that any of the people running were going to be inspiring enough. And obviously, with the election of Mark Carney recently as the Liberal leader, the highest margin I think out of any political leader in Canadian history.
Hmm.
Um, I was wrong. But the point that I was trying to make was that I wanted somebody in the Liberal Party to be inspiring people because I felt like both the NDP and the Liberals at the federal level weren't being inspiring enough. Uh, so when I talk about my role in terms of influencing online, I see it as like talking about the news, talking about politics, getting people engaged, getting people to think.
Hmm.
Do you think that your work then online is more about getting people to change their personal behaviors, or is it more at a societal level? Because I see my role as more societal level.
Um, I don't really think of the two independently, to be totally honest. Um, because what is societal change if not a series of individual changes that add up? Um, and really, in any video that I make, I have two targets. One is the person who I am directly responding to. And I'm hoping that people who are aligned with those viewpoints um, will somehow, hopefully, eventually, come to see that the emperor has no clothes. And at the same time, I'm trying to appeal to people that are already sympathetic. The people that are they're actually the audience of my videos, to give them more ammo for the conversations that they have too. But also to recognize that maybe there's something that they can contribute to in their own life, that something that they can take away from it as well. Whether that's like a conversation about you know domestic, where I'm sure I'm in the video clapping back at somebody who is laughing at the whole notion that men are expected to perform domestic labor. But there are going to be people watching that as well, who want to do better by their partner on the domestic front. And maybe they'll see themselves in some small piece of what I'm saying.
Well, because it's so easy for all of us to say that we want to be better, right? And I think that like one thing I did gain from your content is like I've personally always worked on like the toxic masculinity side of myself. Like when I was younger, like I'm not the alpha male, big bro, blah blah blah. Like
Mm,
I've never been that kind of person, and I knew that about myself. So I've always been very comfortable. Like when I was in high school, I wore a dress for I was running the fashion show. I was the MC, and so we did a little skit about prom, and me and the person were wearing the same prom dress, and I've always tried to acknowledge that about myself and like kind of poke fun at that and be confident in my masculinity, knowing that my masculinity is not that mainstream type. But
sure.
on the other side of it, that's how I project myself out in the world. I One thing that I gained from your content was like at home when I'm dealing with my family, when I'm dealing with my wife, when I'm dealing with my kids, sometimes I was still accidentally projecting those things. And I think it's not until you see like a video where you're kind of breaking down and you say, "Oh, I think I've said that once before," or I think I've thought that before." And so I find that even when you're an ally, even when you're somebody who puts that front and center, you're able to break down these topics in a way that really lets us kind of reflect upon ourselves. And so I really do appreciate the work you do in that regard.
Well, great. I'm glad that it's working exactly the way that I hoped it is. Um, there is something interesting though that I wanted to call back to, even, and it's coming out a little bit in this conversation too. Um, which is that I have heard the criticism of, a style that both of us engage in, but I guess people, are, some people feel that there's, how do I want to necessarily say this? That there's like a disconnect, if not a contradiction, in the approach that I take to some of these videos, which is, combative, masculine, and then the
Ah,
position
I
that I'm
see.
taking.
Yeah, yeah.
And so people who are like, oh, like, shouldn't you, if you're expressing opinions that are contrary to toxic masculinity, isn't there a little bit of that dominant masculinity in the way that you are approaching these people that you
You're
respond to?
almost mansplaining. You know what I mean? Like,
Um, sure. I mean, I've absolutely been accused of mansplaining in my videos too. Uh, which is, that sort of point. It sat very uncomfortably with me at first, and I'm not totally sure that I'm right. Uh, but it's I like it as like a tactic. Um, and this is sort of how I have explained it at times when it's been raised. To say that, well, I have to be able to use the language of the people that I am responding to. I have to be able to address them, um, if not in a way that they would respect, then in a way that they will listen to. And I'm not certain that it would work if I tried to be genuine. If I tried to speak in video the same way that I would in a classroom, where I'm hoping, um, that you will come along for the ride and that you will reach the end point that I'm aiming for on your own. Both due to the fact that, we have like 3 minutes to say what we want to say.
yeah,
Um,
and you'll be lucky sometimes if people actually stick around for the full 3 minutes. So you want to make sure that they're taking away the message earlier on, and then
oh, sure.
yeah, things get lost in the weeds there.
And also, this is why I added a catchphrase to my videos, right? Because I need to be attention grabbing and forceful. Um, and so what do? Like, I announce right off the top, like, it's
Let's make this
gentler,
fun.
it's a euphemism, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's like, all right, like, give it to me, like, throw your
like
best
I can
punch.
take it. So I want you to
Yep,
dish it out, and then we're gonna go at it.
exactly. Um, and so, but part of that is like, I don't know that I can accomplish what I want to accomplish any other way. And like maybe that's a me problem. Um, but that's the spot that I'm sort of sitting in where like, yeah, it's I have to be willing to go there, um, in order to get my message across.
No, I totally get that. Yeah. I want to do a little pivot. Uh,
Sure.
who is your favorite superhero?
Who is my favorite superhero? My whole life, consistently, it's Wolverine.
You know what? There's something about it's and that's the funny thing. People are like, "Oh, your favorite's Wolverine, your favorite Spider-Man." Like, of course, it's so basic, but I'm like, there is a reason why those characters are so insanely popular.
Have a little, just sitting beside me, Wolverine toy from the first X-Men movie. Held on to it this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know about you, but the more I learned about Wolverine, the more that I started to love the character. Like, first he was just like this, like,
Mhm.
insane brawler. He looked cool, and then I'm like, oh, he's Canadian, and oh, he's immortal, and oh, well, essentially immortal, and oh, he's got this, and he's
Essentially.
got that. Yeah, it really started to build up for me, like the love of this character, and then even seeing the different ways that he was portrayed, whether it's in comics or online. But what's your favorite? Like, I know for me, like the one that's attached to my soul is X-Men '97 Wolverine, because that's kind of what I grew up first seeing.
Mhm.
But Old Man Logan, the film, I think was a really like my favorite way of seeing Wolverine. But what's your favorite iteration of Wolverine personally for you?
So I grew up on the comics. And
Like Chris Claremont era, or
yeah, Chris Claremont era. So I started reading X-Men comics in 1988. Um, so I basically, like, shortly after I learned how to read, as a reading X-Men comics. And it was at a funny moment where they had just started reprinting the original Chris Claremont, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne stories from the late 70s. And so every month I was buying whatever the new X-Men issue was, and then also these classic X-Men.
yeah, you're looking at like giant sized X-Men and then like the original team, and you're seeing yeah.
Yep, yep. So yeah, the debut of the new X-Men with Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler. Um, so I was exposed to both of these simultaneously. So then the Wolverine in my mind, that exists as sort of the take, is some combination of that Claremont Byrne Wolverine, who emerges from the sewer in the Dark Phoenix saga to rescue the entire team. But also the Wolverine who is just like punished to a sadomasochistic extent in the Claremont Silvestri stories of like 1989, where Chris Claremont just seemed intent on pushing him to the point that, like, how has this guy not died yet? Every other story had Wolverine near death. And in fact, I don't know how up to date you are in your X-Men lore.
I try to stay up to date. I'm a pretty big comic guy, so
Okay.
I followed up until the end of the Krakoa era, and I think I kind of
Yeah,
been on.
it's like I talked to a couple of the writers on NYX, which is a comic that's coming out right now in the current era.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Um, and they're like, "Hey, have you been reading any of the stuff since Krakoa ended?" And I'm like, unfortunately, every new jumping on point is also a jumping off point, and for now, I've just sort of jumped off.
I didn't even enjoy Krakoa, so when it like I kind of fell off really early
Really?
on. Yeah, I fell off around the issue where we found out that Moira was able to like go back in time over and over and over again, or relive her life, and I was kind of just done with like how we were being introduced to Xavier in his role in the story. So I kind of moved away in that era more on because we were getting more Venom, we were getting more Spider-Man, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna jump over to this side of the comics for now.
So I loved the Krakoan era. And just sort of like it was a whole new politics, a whole new approach to the,
Yeah.
the mutant human relations angle. But to get back to Wolverine, um, so Claremont was actually building this years long tease to killing Wolverine off.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so in Uncanny X-Men 300, he was supposed to finally die. And that, of course, never happened because Claremont left the comic. Um, but I sort of fell in love with this Wolverine who just was a glutton for punishment.
Well, he
Um,
survived a nuke. He survived all of his skin being burned off. Like he's been all over the place.
yeah, and in the comics at that time, he had survived losing his powers and his blood
Having
getting
adamantium
adamantium
ripped out of
poisoned.
his skin or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah, a brood egg. He was transformed into a brood, but his healing factor was able to kill it.
yes, yeah,
He was hung on an X by the Reavers and left, to die of dehydration in the middle of the Australian outback. Just like horrific scene after horrific scene. And in addition to being, of course, a Canadian and a brawler, um, the the movies sort of seem to forget this, but like Wolverine's tiny, right? Like he's a little guy.
He's supposed to be like 5'5". Like he's yeah.
Or even 5'3". I remember
Oh
from
damn,
my Marvel trading cards.
5'3".
So 5'3", and even though anybody who meets me in person now would never think of me as a little guy, uh, I was like consistently the smallest boy in class up until like grade 10. And then I shot up like 9 inches in 1 year.
Damn.
But like, so like also being the little guy and seeing like, oh, like this little guy is awesome.
Well, he's fearless. I mean, when he does the fastball special, like Wolverine, this tiny little thing is being launched at a massive. Why am I forgetting the name of the robots now?
Sentinels.
The Sentinels, yeah, just being launched right at their faces and going right in for it, right? Like there's something invigorating about seeing that.
Oh yeah, and like also constantly underestimated, consistently underestimated.
Yeah.
So I loved all of that about him. Although to be fair, like recently, especially the Jason Aaron run of Thor, that's got
Is
to
that
be like
when he
5 or
becomes
10 years
Osborn?
now. Yeah, starting with the Gore storyline and then moving through to like the Jane Foster Thor stories.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
That era of Thor is also, at least momentarily, the Thors supplanted Wolverine as my favorite character.
Well, Thor in the 2015 Secret Wars, I really enjoyed the Thor Corps. The how everybody they had like everyone was a Thor. They just had like thousands of Thors, and I was like,
Yeah.
I loved seeing a Groot Thor and a Rocket Thor and a Throg or whatever his name was, the Frog Thor. All those different iterations always kind of put a smile on my face. The other thing I wanted to ask you about in terms of superheroes, so like for me growing up, like I was bigger into anime than I was into superheroes and stuff like that. And so like when I would watch these shows, there was like life lessons that like it's not like an after school special where you're like, and that's why drugs are bad. It's more like you watch the character go through things like you were talking about with Wolverine being beaten up, and you see how these characters deal with situations. And so like one of the early like life lessons I took on when I was like 6 or 7 years old, like I was like in grade 2 or 3 when I was watching this, was in Dragon Ball Z, Goku, pretty much every single person in Dragon Ball Z, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but like almost everybody becomes Goku's ally. So like people watching when you're a kid and you're watching and you're only seeing it after the fact, like you don't realize that like all of his best friends in Dragon Ball Z were people like Krillin was originally his bad guy, that's his best friend. Piccolo, who was trying to kill him for years and then raised his son. Like Tien tried to break his arms, and like you're seeing all these guys. Vegeta was like a mass murderer, and then like by the end of the series, you're seeing like, oh yeah, like Goku's real power is that like when he beats somebody, he's able to bring them into the fold and kind of change their behavior. So even when it comes to superheroes, my kid loves Spider-Man. And we're watching the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man series right now, and there's like a lot of life lessons that she's learning about. Like she's barely 4, like she's about 3.5, getting close to 4 now. And I had to explain like what racism was to her, because there was an episode where everyone in the beginning where everyone was being like mean to Lonnie on the bus. They weren't talking to him, like people were shying away from him, and I had to explain like, yeah, like some people are mean because they look at the way somebody looks and the color of their skin, and they have a judgment about that. And I was trying to explain to her like how like that's not good. And my kid she likes to be rough, and she likes to really kind of be a bit crazy, but then she stubs her toe and she cries a lot, and her cry reactions are always much larger than you would assume from how rambunctious and active she is. So I tried to tell her the other day, I'm like, what happens when Peter got hurt, right? He was fighting the Scorpion, he got really hurt. Did he stay on the ground? No, he got back up, right? And we have to pick ourselves back up. And so I try to have her like learn those lessons through superheroes. So is there like outside of Wolverine and kind of the punishment he got, is there a life lesson from a comic book character that you've gotten and you've really kind of made it central to who you are?
Wow. I don't think that's a question that I have ever heard before. I'm sort of so the first thing that I jump back to would actually probably be that Jane Foster Thor.
Like when she was dealing with the cancer and kind of going through all that?
Yeah, so this is I am one of the few people who really loves Thor: Love and Thunder. Thought that it's a great movie.
You know
Um,
what? There were times when I was like, "Ah, this is too much," but I still do overall enjoy it as a
mhm.
film. Like, there's a lot to it that I really love.
And yeah, Russell Crowe. I would probably handle Russell Crowe's Zeus a little differently.
A little differently, yeah.
Yeah, but I only really had one like fundamental problem with it, and it was the way that the Hammer chose Jane, and her motivation for seeking it out in the first place. Because in the movie, she's looking for a cure. She thinks that the Hammer can cure her. Whereas in the comic, we learn pretty much immediately that the Hammer is killing her.
Because
That
every time it would purge all the chemo and all that, and
Yes. So
yeah,
yeah, we learned that yeah, the hammer purges anything that's foreign to your body. And so every time she transforms into Thor, she undoes the treatment that she's receiving. Um, but that like that's the price that she pays because, what she says whenever she's asked without any further explanation, she says the world needs Thor. Um, and there is something about, that selflessness, that dedication to the cause, um, that runs through a lot of superhero stories. What's at the core of Spider-Man? It's that every time he does good, as a consequence, his personal life suffers. Uh, but that he carries that responsibility.
yeah, he's got that
Um,
Parker luck. Things are always kind of he's always down in his luck. Bad things are always happening, but he keeps picking himself back up, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, and he keeps getting back out there, and he keeps doing what he has to do to protect his friends and his family.
Absolutely. And this is something like a Captain America in the MCU has a similar sort of experience where doing the right thing always requires losing someone along the
Personal
way.
sacrifice, yeah.
Whether it's Bucky or flying the jet with the Tesseract on it into the ocean, even though he assumed it was going to kill him. Um, and that of course, like really hyperbolic sacrifice is at the core of so many superhero stories. Um, although I would also, I there's some similarities there with the Wolverine story too, right? Because like there's sort of like a masochistic element to it.
Well, and Wolverine had quite a few future-based stories where he was the last one, or he killed all of the X-Men, or he
Mhm.
did this and that. So he's been put in those positions before, and we've kind of seen him there.
So I want to cite one other superhero then who doesn't fit into that model because I also want something that's just like purely optimistic. Um, I didn't like Superman until I read Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley's All-Star Superman. Didn't
Okay.
didn't care a whole lot for him.
Yeah, I was never
Um,
really a Superman guy either until last couple of years we started to see the different side of the character.
sure, yeah, because you're just like, what? He's perfect. What?
Exactly.
What? How can that possibly be interesting? Um, until and then reading that All-Star Superman story, um, which really an undercurrent going through there is that Superman keeps trying to give Lex Luthor the opportunity to become a better man. And he could have stopped him at multiple points, but he keeps giving Lex another chance. Even gives Lex the opportunity to face him one on one with Superman's own powers. Um, and Superman is holding back the entire time. And we sort of think at first, well, he's waiting it out. He knows that Lex's superpowers have a time limit on them. Until Superman reveals, like, no, that's not what's happening. In fact, I was waiting for your powers to fully activate. And Lex Luthor is like, why? What? Like, doesn't that just make me scarier and more formidable? And then Lex, like, his eyes glaze over and he starts crying. And he's like, wait, like, I can feel everything that you feel. And I'm like looking at these people and I thought that they would look like ants to me. And in fact, like, I feel the full weight of caring for them, and how fragile their lives are and just how much good I can do. Um, and this is what you feel every moment of every day. And Lex like just drops to the ground, and Superman is like, okay, now I got to knock you out because like I can't
Now
take
that
the
you've learned
risk
your
that
lesson,
like
let's fight.
yeah, and like maybe you're a sociopath and maybe that will reassert itself. So let's knock you out. You've learned your lesson, and now let's see what you do with it going forward. And Superman has this great line where he's like, Lex, you could have saved the world years ago if you had any interest in doing it. Like, I was never in your way. Like you were in your way. And that is just like an incredible lesson where it's like, oh, like you're picking all the wrong fights. You're seeing the wrong enemies. Um, and if we can just get out of our own way, think of how much good we could accomplish.
And I think like reflected that's also reflected in Doom, right? Doom is constantly
Sure.
trying to lead the world, and he thinks that he can always do right. And I think we can see that in our modern politics, where there are people
Hmm.
out there who maybe they think that they're the good guy of their own story. They think that they know what's right, and then at a certain point, some like I feel like for a lot of the people who have gained power over the last few years, they might have thought they knew what that they were doing that was right, and then it seems like there was like an empathetic break in people like Elon Musk and
Hmm.
some other high profile politicians who they realized like, oh, it's not just about doing like I don't care about fixing the world, I care about the power that comes with it. And you can even see that at a fundamental level with like Trudeau and with Ford. Um, how their own desire to like whether it was Trudeau holding on to power way longer than he should have, which kind of maybe actually made the perfect storm for Carney to be as popular as he is.
Sure.
If he had stepped down earlier, Carney might not have the full swing that he's having right now. And you can see with Ford calling the election 2 years early just to get in front of the Greenbelt investigation. So like when I look at being a father, I try to really consider like what is my responsibility because I didn't really feel the full weight of responsibility of my job as a teacher or my role in society until I had my kids and I realized that it starts in a smaller level. It starts in your own household.
Hmm.
Um, is there anything that you as a father you came to a realization to over because you have a few kids, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I have a teenager and I have a an almost 10-month-old.
Right. So yeah, and I'm in a bit of a different scenario. I got a almost 4 year old and I got a 6 month old. Um, but were there any moments as you were raising your kids that you kind of thought to yourself, I have a responsibility to teach them X, Y, Z in a different way so that they don't make the same mistakes that I do, or they don't make the same mistakes that we as a society have been doing?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean it never stops, right? Um, and it's it I don't want to like just repeat the cliche of I learn as much from them as they learn from me.
But
But
it's a cliche for a reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
it happens. And you become hyper aware at moments of like, oh, like I was so caught up in what I thought was happening that I stopped paying attention to what was actually occurring in front of me. Um, or just, I also fall into the trap sometimes of believing, well, I'm dad and I know
I know
best.
it's right. Yeah.
Yep. And then having to catch myself and say like, oh wait, like no, maybe I've been wrong about this the whole time. Um, I don't want to get into too many specifics,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I talked much more openly about my older daughter and parenting in the first year or two that I was operating in social media. And then she made it clear, very, very explicit last year. Um, she's like, can you, if you're going to share any details um, that could affect me some way, can you run that by me first? And I said, yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And so I have actually removed something um, where I thought that I was being vague enough, that I was being ambiguous enough. Um, but because I was just talking about myself as a parent,
Yeah, for sure.
and she saw that and was like, I don't like what that implies about me. So, okay, then we'll just take it down. So even figuring out how to navigate this space as a parent, um, but with the full realization that what I say and do could have an impact on her in ways that like I can't
You
necessarily
can
predict.
comprehend, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's
I
tough.
think, yeah, and I mean, like, I've gotten a lot of comments recently, and I've had people reach out to me and asking me, like, "Hey, like, are you ever gonna run for politics?" And it's something that has, like, danced around my mind almost in a joking way for a
Mhm.
while. But I think over the last few months, there's been more real conversations that people have had with me, both offline and online about it. And the thing that's holding me back more than anything else, it's not about losing. I don't care. I'll go out and lose. I've lost before. Um, but I think about like what would be the impact on my kids,
Sure.
regardless of the level of where I end up. Even when I'm doing content like this, like what could blow back on my kids, and it's only been in the last like 3 or 4 months when things started to become more real in terms of like, oh, this might be something that I could possibly do, that I hesitated, because before it was always like a fantasy where like, oh yeah, that'll never happen. I'm never going to do X, Y, Z. I'm never going to get big on social media. I'm never going to be in chats with political leaders about the future of the province and the country. And then as things start to solidify,
Mhm.
like you realize like, oh, I am here, and this is happening, and I have to really consider that impact on my kids. So that is something that I've also been wrestling with. Like, how do we as adults navigate in this world without affecting our kids and still providing them everything we want to provide them, and still doing all the things that we want to do to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. Um, so
Sure,
that's
and I don't think that there's a way to avoid it, right? Like if we're going to have an online presence, especially if you're considering doing something even more public facing than what you're doing right now, like running for political office, there's no way to avoid the impact. So then it's just a question of like, okay, well, how can I insulate them? What steps can I take? Like I don't know what sort of DMs or unsolicited emails you get. But the very first threat that I ever received was a threat against my older daughter.
Yeah, I had a very similar situation,
Yeah.
and I went. Thankfully, I was able to go to the police, and the police coordinated with the police from the city that the person was in. I was able to find out where they were just by googling their name, and thankfully that was shut down really quickly. But it's it's real. Like, there are
Yeah.
people out there who would be willing to do whatever and threaten you in whatever way possible to get you to shut up, and that sucks. That's the world we live in.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Because they perceive this as like our weak spot, right? So they're going to go after it. And those people are out there, and there's nothing that we can we can't actually account for their behavior. There's nothing that we could do short of shutting up and disappearing. So if we're not going to do that, then what steps can we take? And it's unfortunate, and it's a huge stressor, and in a lot of cases, just a waste of our time, because that's what they want to do too. If they can't scare us, then at least they can waste our time. And unfortunately, we just got to figure out how to work with it.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's a good place to kind of to leave it off at. Like, we're fighting the good fight, and
Mhm.
there are impacts on our lives, and we have to be considerate both of the impact it has on us and on our families and our kids, and the responsibility we have to society as a whole as well. And there are people who count on us to uh, help them learn new things and be guided through difficult times. And like, I didn't ever expect that to be where I am, but uh, it is what it is, and I have this responsibility now. And I just want to appreciate. I think we had a really good conversation, just kind of diving into different aspects of like what it means to be responsible and what it means to change people's
Yeah.
minds, and how we can go about doing that. So I really appreciate the conversation.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on.
All right, and if you guys want to check out anything else that I'm doing, you can always go to my YouTube channel. You can see any of the long form videos I put out. Is there anything you wanted to plug real quick?
Oh, just all of the old socials. They can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I'm trying to grow a
It's
following on
tough.
YouTube.
It's tough.
It's
Yeah.
it's not going so well. So if anybody wants to look me up on YouTube, especially, um, y- there are various spellings, but they're all Professor Neil.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
All right, thank you.